Good morning. I want to talk about what went on the last few days. That's a picture of a corridor at a condo, and here's me talking in my condo. But to go back to the picture, uh, and that looks like in the condo is a display of extrasolar planets. That's some food we had at the election event. We had to bring our own food. Actually, that's at Frederico's, but I did have a pizza there. That's another display at the condo. Very close to to where I live. Um, on Tuesday, June the 18th, I did work the 16-hour day as an election officer. If it was a prime, I've done this. I did it three times in the previous decade in Arlington, and then in 20, I did it in 20, or actually in the 2000, I did it in 2020, right after the pandemic started, the primary, and then I did it in 2022, a general election in 2023, a general election in 2024, presidential primary, and then Tuesday, which was just one election, the Republican primary for Senate, U.S. Senate. Some other precincts in Virginia had Democratic and Republican, and you can pick one to vote. Is that you don't have to register with a party. You can pick when you go in to vote. You pick on one primary, and the officer has to be careful giving you the right card. But there was only one yesterday. A lot of people didn't understand it. You don't have to state your party affiliation in Virginia. You do not. And I don't. And it's just like I don't state pronouns and I saying that. It almost sounds like a political alert. But I'll get back to that later. But this was my kind of my own sort of community service. You get paid $260 for the day. It's a very long day. You have to be there at 5 a.m. And if you don't get there on time, it blows the day. You can't leave the premises. You have to bring your own food. We didn't have a refrigerator, so I had to bring cold food or order it. And this is kind of a little bit, a little bit of a day in, almost like a day in the military, but this is my kind of way of serving right now. When you do something infrequently, it's hard to pick up the skills that it takes to be good at it. I can be good at my own stuff at home and my own setup and for the doing the videos and doing the blogs and writing books and everything. I was not that good at being helpful as a good worker. It's something you only do every few months, and the other people around you know a lot more than you do. So there's a lot of idle time while the polls are open, which is for 13 hours. But you have to be very efficient in doing the work and setting it up, and then taking it down, and sending it up to be sent back. And then the, I was a I was a collection officer. I rode with somebody out to Fairfax County to government, taking some of the materials in a bag. It has to be packaged a certain way. You have to do stuff very precisely. So that this kind of service sort of emphasizes the need for to do work that needs to be done, sort of quasi national service or quasi military. And elderly people do a lot more of election work, which is with these very long days, it can be a little bit risky. But that to me is something I'm a lot more comfortable with than polarized activism or being known for raising money for other people's, for minority groups or for other people's nonprofits. Or I feel like that's not me. And, because I am a speaker, I do blog and make videos and write books. And so the issue of having your skin in the game, if you talk a lot, is very important to your personal credibility. So you have to do some service and things may not be as good in the future for this kind of service just because you think you can comment on something and get something right may not be enough to keep you on in the future. And we'll be talking about that again soon. Problems about Section 230, the problems about age verification of sites and COPA and some of these things. Well, there's a lot going on there. We'll be talking about that again pretty soon. Um, I also did something on I also did something on, and let me just run through wanted to run through the other pictures here. And just run through. I think I ran through all that. And went over to the Unitarian Church in Arlington to see yesterday on Juneteenth, to see their very interesting display of pride flags that are all kinds of things. Um, there's a pride flag with the entire, the trans portion and then the rainbow. But what was interesting is that many of the flags were either a trans flag or they were a rainbow flag without the trans part, which raises the question that that one has the trans part, that one doesn't. Here's again two that don't have it and one that does. And there's a row of them. Most of them don't have the trans part. And here again is a pride flag that's a trans flag. That gets into a discussion of something else about the polarities. And I'll get back to that in just a minute. At the 9th Street Center, where it met in New York in the 1970s, in front of that building, I think. But I want to play a video, just a quick video that I made yesterday. Interesting display at the Unitarian Universalist Church of Arlington, Virginia. That flag has the trans triangle, but some of them don't. The point being that having separate trans flags sort of raises the question, should trans be separated from LGB? In my mind, it raises the question. But some of the flags do have them combined in one flag. So I can't say that's true of all of them. So I'm just like here's a separate trans flag. Here's a separate LGBT tag, but then some of them are combined. So I can't say that's completely true for the entire flag display for Pride Week. People were getting out of the building, just in the background. For example, and just cut back to that. But that sort of shows, I think they were trying to convey the idea that you should make up your own mind. That they realize that the issues are different to some extent, that the needs of the affected populations are quite different, and the effect of their needs and their on others in society is quite different historically. There's a very different history, and there's a lot of controversy about that. I just I thought I would today would bring up one more subject, which is the whole idea of polarities, I've talked about that before. I showed a picture of the Ninth Street Center and the stills, and a picture of a DVD of a recording of Rosenfels talking to some of his patients back in the 1970s. The Rosenfels polarity theory was that people have an internal identity that is masculine or feminine, and they also have an operational way of living, which is either objective or feminine, objective or subjective. I was considered feminine subjective, by the way. An objective person likes an objective person is more concerned with actually getting practical results with in the real world with others, whereas a subjective person is more concerned with absolute ideas and absolute truth. And an objective, particular a feminine objective person would be willing to accept the guidance of the needs of others, work with nonprofits, volunteer with other people, be an activist, in the traditional sense. A feminine subjective person like me would want to follow his own defined goals rather than let others choose that goals for him, which if you speak publicly and that becomes controversial, you have your own story to tell, but people may want you to be more concerned about their needs and simply be concerned about yours all the time. Although that cuts both ways, because that's been a criticism of some of the issues with trans particularly. By the way, a heterosexual marriage in the Rosenfels idea world can certainly exist with it. You can have a feminine person with a feminine polarity as a husband and a masculine polarity as a wife. And Tom Bilyeu talked about that to Konstantin Kisin in October of 2023. Colin Wright, the Reality's Last Stand, even though he's a very male person, strikes me as psychologically feminine because he's so insistent on getting the absolute truth, the absolute scientific truth, absolutely right. And making that his objective is just simply the absolute truth that you can't get beyond. And he's not prejudiced against people in any way. It's just his simple way that you have to base your policies on reason. I thought I would also, I'll show them my resume in just a minute. Judith Butler, you could compare the polarities to the idea of performativity with Judith Butler, and her idea that performativity is sort of a demonstrated capability to do certain things or an inclination which is predictive of what your future activity will be. Like dating from heterosexual boys in college, dating girls is sort of setting up a performativity for getting married and having children in that marriage in the future. But then other things are performativities for not doing that. I mean, and it ultimately is kind of similar to polarity temperaments. I call them because there are four combinations, masculine and feminine with objective and subjective. So you could call them the four temperaments if you wanted. But those are for personal growth. It's the far left that has wanted to make those into public labels, particularly masculine or feminine, or maybe neither, not like non-binary. And the far left has been inconsistent with itself, even at an intellectual level, as to what it wants sometimes. I would call those labels gender expressions, but activists want these to be true gender identities, a concept that seems rather circular to me. But they want to do that in order to enlarge marginalized groups and lead the world to a more, we call this queer theory, lead this world to a more communal society, basically Marxism or communism. And one of the problems with somebody like me, the way I relate to other people is what you might call upward affiliation. I look for someone that will if someone I'm going to be intimate with has to be an all around very superior person, but most people are not good at everything. Now, to simply do business with people or have a friendship with people. No, it's not necessarily that they be attractive or anything, particularly. But I want to have somebody like that in my life to look up to as sort of the center of attention in my own mind. That when everybody in a small group thinks that way, people start feeling threatened, which is kind of what happened with my William and Mary experience. But I wanted to just, again, I have a resume here, and since I talked about working, and I may apply for temporary jobs. Um, I haven't actually put the times I did worked as an election officer. I think it's 7 times on my resume. I'll have to do that. And then, of course, here are the books again. And again, there's kind of controversy over should you have to sell everything you do to make a legitimate business just to stay online. That's kind of a concern I have, the way things may be headed, even though others very much disagree with me and say that the future for speech is actually good. But I'm quite concerned with the polarization on both sides on the restrictions of free speech, particularly if it's not commercially motivated. I'm actually very concerned about the future of that with Section 230 and being threatened again, uh, sunset at the end of 2025, or the idea of mandatory labels for all internet sites or that kind of age labels, and because you take responsibility for what your speech may affect down the line. Children, you don't have children yourself, but you have to be responsible for help others who do have children with their responsibility. And that's something I'm very concerned about. Um, just wanted, I think I got these last 2 pictures. That was the CD of the Rosenfels tape. And then this was, I think it was this building. I think it was this building on 9th Street that the 9th Street Center was in, and 1970 in the 1970s all the way to 1991. But that's what I have for this morning, and I'll talk a lot more about this speech issues soon and my own publishing and movies and so forth very soon. And I do thank you for listening.